The setting sun sprinkled on the vast forest and sea, and the clouds were dyed red and rose like waves. The sky is as clean as a flat lake, and a wisp of cooking smoke rises. Beneath the smoke was a rudimentary settlement, littered with huts made of branches and long grass. Dozens of tribesmen in leather skirts made a fire to cook in the middle of the fire pit, laughing and joking, and the aroma of corn, wild vegetables, and unknown animal meat wafted in the air. 12-year-old Shila stood in the depths of the woods, looking at the settlement in the distance a little confused. He has a delicate face, black hair, black eyes, yellow skin, and a small clean face. On his head was a conical pointed hat, a dark green waistcoat that could wrap around his body, a brown loincloth tied around his belly, the cloth head hanging down just to cover the vital points, and moccasins on his feet. He held a foot-long obsidian dagger in his right hand, and a small shield tied to his left. It is said to be a small shield, but it is enough to cover his small body. Most notable is a special obsidian necklace that hangs from his neck to his chest, an important status symbol. Shillis looked in front of him. A group of strong warriors could be seen faintly in the shadows of the trees. The warriors were dressed in green leather armor and outlined strong lines. Cuffs dyed red, same loincloth, pointed leather cap. However, most of them were barefoot, with a rope tied around their waists, a half-meter leather wooden shield on the left hand, engraved with terrifying patterns, and a long obsidian stick over a meter long in the right hand, and the sharp inserts had been removed. At this moment, the warriors hunched over to keep quiet, but their eyes gleamed with danger and excitement. Perhaps feeling Shirot's gaze, the two samurai stood up and walked over silently. The leading samurai is in his 30s or 40s. He is extraordinarily strong. His face is painted with red and green stripes. He wears a fierce tiger helmet. Bright feathers hang from the back of the helmet. This is the elite of the empire, the leader of a 20-man squad, a jaguar warrior. The jaguar walked up to Shirot, we're going to attack soon. This is your first time participating in the battle, so you don't need to follow us to charge. You stand on the outside. If you see anyone escaping, the savage will tell tales. If you see a suitable opponent, you can also go up, use your shield and knife. Remember, you don't need to take prisoners, don't keep your hands. After he finished speaking, he turned his head to the young warrior beside him and instructed, Turs, follow Shalot, don't let him face the wrong opponent. If he can deal with it, don't intervene. For the first time, let him stained with blood. I will take you 2 prisoners. After speaking, he nodded to Xiolo and left again quietly. The young warrior was about 20 years old, and squatted beside Shalot in frustration. Shirot, I will always be by your side, and later you can find a lonely little savage or an old savage. Telephones, why are we attacking this group of tribesmen? They haven't hurt us. With confusion in his eyes, the memory of the past always haunts his mind, even if it starts to blur. Hundreds of years later his values still stubbornly survive in his heart, in this cruel jungle age. Why? Terry scratched his head. Because the new Trotoani has just ascended the throne, we need more sacrifices in the coronation ceremony. Then why spend so many lives in sacrifice ceremonies? Because this is the preference of the gods. At this moment, a loud eagle cry came, and then dozens of figures rushed out of the jungle. With terrifying howls from their mouths, the samurai surrounded the settlement from all sides. A jaguar rushed in front. The stripes on the tiger's skin were colorful and jumping, and the heavy obsidian long stick was like dancing lightning, and a light slap knocked a young savage unconscious to the ground. Then a backhand hit the other person's waist and abdomen, and the other person immediately fell to the ground and rolled over in pain. The other samurai also continued to achieve victories, and even though the number of tribesmen was 4 or 5 times that of the samurai, the battle was one-sided. The short spear hurriedly raised by the tribal warrior was deftly avoided by the warriors, and there were shallow marks on the leather armor of the warriors. Several tribal hunters also began to resist, shooting short homemade arrows with rudimentary hunting bows and inserting them into the leather armor of several warriors. This was the last effective resistance, and it was quickly defeated by the warriors who were attracted. The next battle turned into a one-sided chase and capture. The tribesmen fled in all directions. The warriors either chased or pulled out ropes and satisfied captives. A samurai began to sway the fire from the fire pit to the hut, and soon the glow and the cries of the fire filled the sunset. "Let's go too!" Tells urged behind him. Shalot stared blankly at the firelight of the tribe, the figures flickered in front of his eyes, and the crying and laughter seemed to be far and near. At this time, a thin figure suddenly rushed from the front, and the sound of running came with a violent panting, and was rushing towards Shalot. "Be careful!" An urgent shout came from behind. The figure in front obviously also found Shalot, and the sharp wooden spear in his hand stabbed straight at the small enemy. Shirot's eyes flashed, his left hand raised his shield subconsciously, and the wooden spear rubbed the thick skin and slid to one side. The actions of compulsory training in the past 2 years have been like flowing water. Reading www.yuyuganshu.com. Xiaoluo took a step forward, followed by a push with his right hand. The dagger pierced deeply into a soft object, and the moist liquid warmed his palm. The figure in front of him paused, and the wooden spear weakly hit the shield again, and then again. The strength rapidly diminished. Only then did Xiaoluo see the person in front of him, an unkempt young man, extremely thin, 15 or 16 years old, with a pair of hateful eyes staring at him, and then his pupils gradually diverged, and his body slipped from the dagger softly, powerless. He collapsed in front of Charlotte, still looking at her with lost eyes. As if being hit by something, Shiloh staggered back a step, the dagger slipped to the ground from his right hand, and his knees suddenly softened. At this time, a pair of big hands behind him firmly supported the boy's shoulders. "Good job," Tells said, "I'm very skilled in stabbing with a shield. It seems that the priest and the captain are well trained." "I didn't mean to," Theros murmured. "What? Why do you do this? Why? Fighting is the greatest glory, the greatest joy. Of course, so is the sacrifice. After grabbing some sacrifices, we can wait for this year's coronation ceremony. I'm really looking forward to it." Tells smiled innocently, with a gleam of joy in his eyes. "It's not right, it's not right. What are you talking about? I can't hear you. It's normal to be a little dizzy the first time. It was the same for me the first time. Of course, you are younger. Oh, the captain's side seems to be over, let's hurry over there." Lei picked up the dagger and stuffed it into Shirot's waist. Then he half-pulled the boy towards the jaguar. Behind him, the corpse of a young man was lying on the grass, his eyes staring blankly at the sky. The sunset gradually faded away, and the darkness engulfed him. "You stupid turkeys, you can get hurt even if you fight such a small settlement." In front of Shalas, the jaguar Orosh was furious and roared at several warriors who were scratched by spears and short arrows. "Don't hurry up and treat the wound, put yucca juice on me, and then put the leaves of the ink tree on it. If you are chosen by the of death, Shuratel, you will rot in the rainforest back." The warriors smelled Yan took out the prepared small sisal bag and took out these natural medicines to treat each other's wounds. As a classical military society that has fought for decades, the Aztec city-states already have an effective set of methods to deal with injuries. Yucca and ink tree are 2 effective antibacterial plants. "And you, what are you doing tying up these old men and children? Are you carrying the rainforest for more than 10 days? Let me go, the old men, children, and thin women are all set free, so that I can come and catch people at the next big festival. Captain Alashi, here is a hunter with a broken leg." "Hey!" Alash glanced at the tribal hunter on the ground, and Shiloh finally regained some attention and looked at the hunter. The hunter is about 30 years old, with a weathered face and slightly lowered eyes, his left leg is twisted in an abnormal posture, and his right leg is surrounded by scattered spears and single bows, and his body is curled up, silent, by the fire pit. Elashi got closer and kicked the spear off the ground with one kick. He glanced at the other party's slightly curled hands and calluses, his pupils shrank slightly, and his right hand touched the obsidian stick. This can't be left, Marley, you were shot by the hunters just now, and the hunter will be handed over to you. Okay, Captain. A samurai with leaves on his right shoulder walked over with a long stick, his face full of cruel smiles. At the moment when the long stick was swung down, the hunter's right leg slammed, and the hound generally jumped up from the ground, his right arm stretched, and a bone arrow was added to his right hand at some point, and it went straight to Marley's neck. Marley leaned back in horror, and waved the long stick in his right hand. Seeing that the arrow was about to be inserted into the neck, an obsidian battle stick came first. The stick hit the hunter's arm, and the arm immediately twisted away from the target. Then the tip of the stick slammed forward and hit the hunter. On his chin, there was a crackling sound. Shirot saw the hunter's eyes widen suddenly, the familiar hateful eyes, and a deformed face, and then landed weakly on the soil ground. Marley came back to his senses, and angrily slapped his body on the ground, his body swaying along the stone stick like a worn-out rag doll. Charlotte heard a suppressed cry, and saw a twitching young body among the children not far away. An 11 or 12-year-old girl looked at the hunter on the ground while crying. Enough! Shirot suddenly couldn't help rushing forward, he's dead. Marley turned his head sharply and stared at Chalice, with a bloodthirsty light like a wolf in his eyes. Stop, Turkey! Elash frowned. Be alert next time. Go, do something serious, and tie the young captives together. Only then did Marley stop, glaring at Shiralt again, turned around and left. Shirot, how was the hunt today? Shirot, he killed a quasi-warrior today, and the stabbing action with his shield is great. Tells stepped forward and replied. That's right. Elash finally smiled and nodded. Turs, go and count the prisoners. I prepared the two over there for you. Charlotte, what are you doing? Sheila squatted down, looked at the godless eyes for a while, and then slowly closed the hunter's eyes. The cry not far away seemed to grow louder. Orosh frowned again when he saw Shiralt's actions. Okay, he is also a worthy warrior. Shiralt, don't waste your time on dead enemies. Shirot nodded silently, not knowing which sentence he said for Orosh, or none at all. Captain, I've counted them, and the qualified prisoners have a total of 2 palms of 1 palm and 1 palm away. Teres ran back excitedly to report. 5 times 10 minus 5, that's 45. Charlotte calculated silently in his heart. The tribe had at most 100 people, and lost 45 young men and women in one go, plus a few who died in battle, almost completely destroyed. How long can the remaining 50 old, weak, sick, and disabled survive in this fierce jungle? Even if it lasts for a while, after more than 10 years of recovery, he will be caught and targeted by the prisoner team, and the cycle will continue. What can I change? Shirot looked at the burning settlement and thought silently. Okay. There are about 2 or 3 prisoners per person, and we can prepare for the return journey. Elash nodded and shouted, the battle is over. Now, you can go and have some fun yourself. But the turkeys give me remember, none of the sacrifices you can bring back are allowed to be killed. The warriors responded with a bang, and quickly removed the shield of his left hand and stuck the obsidian stick behind his back. Then he happily carried a prisoner and walked towards the woods. Charlotte suddenly noticed Marley. The cruel warrior walked directly to the crying girl. Marley, what are you doing? For the first time, Shillis was really angry. He rushed forward, and used his shield to withstand Marley. That old hyena almost stabbed me to death with an arrow. Marley also roared, I want to get it back from his daughter. You bastard, you coward. A coward who does something to children. Charlotte said angrily. What did you say? Marley's eyes suddenly turned red, and he reached out to touch the battle stick behind him. Cowards are the most despised beings in the warrior-loving Mexica society. Don't take out weapons to your own people. A roar came, and the jaguar rushed over like a beast. He held Shirot down with his left hand, and pulled his right hand hard, and Marley stepped back suddenly, almost being thrown. Fly out! Shirot, what's the matter with you? Alashi separated the two and looked at Charlotte dissatisfied. Marley is going to do something to that girl. That girl belongs to the hyena. Shut up! Alashi turned his head and shouted. The anger on his face was more obvious than ever. Mali, no matter what you want to do, I'm not allowed to do anything to myself. Shirot is a warrior and will soon become a priest. The war priest is sacred in the army, you must respect his will, let alone such an insignificant matter. Apologize to him. But Charlotte is only 12 years old. Apologize to him, you reading www.yuyuganshu.com Macaulay. I'm sorry, Shirot. Macaulay lowered his head and couldn't see his expression clearly. He spat out his apology word by word, then glanced fiercely at the girl hiding in the corner, and turned away. Alash watched Macaulay leave with anger. Only then turned around, glanced at Xiaoluot, and smiled slightly. Yes, Xiaoluot. Dare to fight against warriors stronger than yourself is the way of the brave. These warriors are unruly wolves. You can only be the jaguar that rules them if you grow stronger than everyone else. Then Alash took another look at the girl in the corner. This girl is too young and too thin to bring back to the city-state. Whatever you want, just do it here. After listening, Charlotte nodded and stepped forward. The girl shrank back in fear. Charlotte took out the cotton cloth in his pocket and wiped the tears and ashes from the girl's face, and saw an unexpectedly beautiful little face. Then Charlotte took off the dry food bag from his waist and stuffed it into the girl's hands, leaving his tentacles cold. So Charlotte took off his waistcoat again and put it on the girl. Leave here, go north, the farther the better, don't come back. The girl forgot to cry a little, and stared at Xiaolot in a daze, wondering if she understood. Shiloh smiled at the girl. He was about to turn his head. Thank you, teacher. Turning to look, there was no one, Alash had already left. The other children didn't know when to hide away. Socialist thought for a while, took off the obsidian dagger from his waist, and put it on the ground. One last look at the girl before leaving without looking back. Let me hide all the softness here, and then really face the world. Everything can be changed, I am, and so can the world. Sherald thought when he left, and he seemed to hear crying again in his ears. Spent a sleepless night on the ruins of the settlement. It's still the second half of Mexico's dry season, and it's early February according to the Gregorian calendar, so there's no rain overnight. The next morning, Charlotte got up from the bonfire and went to fetch water with Tells. The most important luggage in the rainforest is food and water. Semi-nomadic settlements can't have much food storage. The samurai simply scavenge for some bacon and cornmeal, and have no interest in those unknown wild vegetables, dried fruits, and insects. Alash used strong sisal rope to string the prisoners into two parallel strings, and then took Shalis. The Tells half-team opened the way in front, and Macaulay and the remaining half-team held the line in the rear. The road in the rainforest is always rough and difficult. Tall trees cover the sky, and among the branches are colorful snakes. Swamps and mud puddles lie beneath your feet, and the aquatic plants are teeming with poisonous frogs and flies. This is a green desert, and every still water hole hides parasites and poisons. Fortunately, Alash is both a brave jaguar fighter and an expert in jungle survival. He applied a pungent ointment to everyone, and soon found a river, which meandered south along the relatively empty banks. Walking on the muddy edge of the river bank, Charlotte carefully kept a distance from the dead wood in the river to avoid encountering surprises like the American crocodile. While curious, he asked Alash, "Teacher, where does this river lead to?" "This river is called Tempon," and it goes upstream along the river and will pass through 2 alliance city-states. It only takes half a month for us to return to the holy city of Teotihuacan, and 3 days further south is the capital of the Great Alliance, the home that the sun promised us the Mexicans, Tenochtitlan, the city of the lake. It was a majestic and beautiful city, with 1,000 canoes laden with goods and 1,000 species chinampa full of corn, 1,000 communities full of Mexica warriors, and a great temple full of 1,000 boulders. It is the greatest city-state of the Union and the center of the world. Your family and I are from there. Charlotte nodded. Tenochtitlan was the capital of the Aztec city-state alliance and the most prosperous and powerful city-state. This magnificent city in the lake was eventually destroyed by the Spanish colonists, which also represented the demise of the Aztec civilization. Above the ruins of Tenochtitlan, is the city of Mexico. After thinking about the prosperity and beauty of the capital for a while, Charlotte asked again, "Teacher, have you been to the lower reaches of the Tempon River?" At this moment, it was Olash's turn to fall into memory, and it took him a long time to answer. Many years ago, I followed the great Montezuma I to conquer the Aztec city-states, from here down the Tempon River, for more than 20 days, across the mountains is the plain, and at the end of the plain and forest is the city-state of the Aztecs, Cuxacapan. Behind the city-state is an endless lake, which is the end of the world and leads to every corner of the world. There are many distant islands in the lake, from which tribesmen would come in small boats to trade feathers, pottery, and cotton. Legend has it that in the north of the Great Lake, there is also the land of endless forest. There are only wild people in the forest. Every year, there will be terrible disasters, killing all life with white ashes. Shiro was stunned for a while, only to realize that the big lake is the Caribbean Sea, the islands are Caribbean islands, and the continent with forests and snow is North America. For the Aztecs of the Stone Age or Early Bronze Age, the Mesoamerican city-states with warm seasons were all the world had to offer. In a rainforest without roads, vehicles, and horses, walking for 3 or 4 months, at most 500 or 600 kilometers, is the limit of cognition of the world. In this world, the Mayan cities of the Yucatan Peninsula are inaccessible foreign countries. The Caribbean islands are stories passed down from the past, the Indian tribes in North America and the Inca Empire in South America are unknown legends, not to mention the farther side of the ocean, the Spanish conquistador who arrived at an unknown time. Thinking about the unknown world and the future, Charlotte didn't speak, just followed Oroch silently. The road in the rainforest also greatly consumed his physical strength. The team in the middle took a break because the scout spotted a wild deer drinking by the river. Olosh ordered everyone to be silent. He went forward alone, took out a 2-meter-long wooden throwing spear, put the feathered end on the long spear thrower, then held the spear thrower with his right hand, and bowed his waist under the shade of the trees. Sneak silently. Stalking until about 30 meters, the wild deer suddenly stopped drinking water, raised its head and seemed to be aware of it, and heard a shrill sound of breaking the air coming towards it, and then fell heavily to the ground, losing its life in an instant. The warriors cheered together and shouted the name Jaguar. The prisoners in the distance couldn't help but show fear. Shirot stepped forward to check, and saw that the spear was inserted into the heart of the wild deer, and the strength was actually coming out through the body. Shocked by the precision and power of this long-range weapon, Xiaoluo said half in admiration and half in envy, "Master, this spear throwing is so powerful, can I follow it?" Oroch also had a look on his face, nodded and shook his head, "I will teach you, but you can't practice spear throwing in a year or 2. Soon you will enter the temple to start the practice of priests, and there is no shortage of alliances. A jaguar, but every priest is important." After that, he set up a camp by the river and set fire to it, and told Tells to clean up the deer carcasses, skin and bacon. And let half of the samurai go hunting in the woods to replenish food. He himself took out an obsidian knife, retouched the sharp point of the spear by the campfire, and dried it on the fire to set it. Perhaps the sharpness of wood and stone weapons can be compared with the early metal weapons, but the durability is very different. After trekking like this for 2 or 3 days, the altitude gradually increased, the trees became sparser, and the field of vision broadened. In the distance, Charlotte saw a wisp of smoke rising from the kitchen, sparse corn growing on the vast field, slash and burn cultivation, only a vague outline of the farmland, and a small village gradually appeared at the end of the field of vision. As the samurai team approached, the village suddenly sounded a high-pitched flute. Shirot saw the chaotic figures gathered in the village, while Oroch led the team to a stop in the wilderness about 100 meters away from the village. 20 warriors held shields and sticks and waited quietly. After a while, the village team swarmed out. More than 200 strong men held various wooden sticks and stone spears, a dozen hunters held simple and fragile single bows and slings, and at the front were surrounded by a feathered head and silver ornaments. The old man looked at the jaguar costume, and there was a trace of unease that could not be concealed on his face. He hurried forward with a few villagers, bowed and saluted. "This respected jaguar warrior, I am the elder of the village. I don't know what order I have come to our village. We Aztec have surrendered to the Great Alliance more than a dozen. The rainy season is long, and the 4 tributes are made on time every year. The tribute at the beginning of this year was paid early. It is not yet the harvest season, and there is no grain or fur in the warehouse. The great Asaya cartel has returned to the kingdom of the gods, and his brother Tasak has been enthroned as the new Trato Ani. A grand coronation ceremony will be held this year." Speaking of the coronation ceremony, Orochi even glanced at the village elder. A look of fear appeared on the village elder's face. You read www.yukanshu.com immediately knelt down on his knees. "We Aztecs have never wavered our loyalty to the alliance, and we are willing to pay more tribute to congratulate the great king on his accession to the throne." "Very good. As long as we remain loyal to the alliance, we won't be sacrificed in the sacrificial ceremony. We have just returned from capturing the sacrificial offerings in the northern jungle." As he said, Alashi pointed to the captives in the distance. "Now we need food for 100 people for 10 days, mostly tortillas and black beans for the rest. Of course we won't take it for nothing." Looking at the village elder's extremely ugly face, he looked at the more than 200 armed men not far away. Oroch thought for a moment, took out a bulging cotton pouch, and handed it to the elder. "Here are 2 palm-sized cotton cloths and 2 handfuls of cocoa beans. We have just returned from capture and are in a hurry to return to the city. We will not stop in your village." This sentence was like the last weight that overwhelmed the balance. The village elder finally nodded bitterly, returned to the villagers, and gave a few words loudly. I saw a small commotion among the villagers, which was quickly subsided by the elder's reprimand, and then 2 villagers went to the largest building in the village, carried out 2 large bundles of corn cakes, and each came over with a large clay pot. Seer Alt saw them bow their heads in fear and hand over the tortillas and clay pots to the warriors, and when they returned to the villagers, they turned into an angry expression. Alash weighed the tortilla, opened the clay pot again, took a sip of the black bean puree inside, then nodded in satisfaction to the village elder, and then waved back. The warriors put the obsidian battle stick behind their backs, and walked away with food and prisoners. After walking for a while, Charlotte looked back at the village in the distance. The villagers seemed to be gathering together with crude weapons and watched the warriors leave. The smoke was still rising slowly from the village, and there seemed to be flames burning secretly below. After leaving the Aztec village, the procession hurried south for another 2 days. The rainforest has long since disappeared, replaced by sparse mountain forests. The sky became clear, and the people walking on the road gradually became denser. The land became fertile and easy to cultivate, and extensive farmland spread along the banks of the river. Until noon on this day, Charlotte saw a small lake at the tributary of the Tempon River. In the middle of the lake was a field in the lake that looked like a floating island. The edge of the floating island was a circle of supporting and fixed fences, half underwater. In the center of the floating island is a neatly staggered water channel, which cuts the floating island into even small pieces. On the fields of the floating island, the three main staples of corn, pumpkin, and kidney beans, as well as peppers, sunflowers and precious herbs are densely planted. This is the first chinampa on the way home. Looking at the fields in the lake, Alosh finally smiled. We have finally returned to the land of the city-states of Mexico. Today, we can have a good night's sleep. The city-state of Metztitlan is not far ahead, Shalas, you can go to the central market with tells. Buy some gadgets you like. Sure enough, not long after Shalat walked forward, a city in Chinese and American style appeared near the river. A 4 to 5 meter high stone city wall was enough to be called a fortified city in the Middle Ages, and the city walls were carved with dark red patterns. Going over the city wall, you can see at a glance the twin pyramids unique to the Aztecs, which are dozens of meters high. At the same time, they enshrine the Rein Turaloc and the patron saint Huitzilopochtli. It is still afternoon, the gates of the city are wide open, and the villagers start to return from the city. Most of them are shirtless, with only a long loincloth tied around their waists. They are carrying newly purchased stoneware and pottery, and a few are hugging them tightly. A long cotton cloth, carefully hurried away. The city-state warriors wore white or yellow vests and uniforms, with loincloths or leather skirts tied around their waists, and small shields and battle sticks on their backs. A little further away, several nobles and priests were sitting on their shoulders. They were slowly approached by the slaves, and the commoners and warriors along the way gave way to them. Shalat looked at their multicolored shawls and feathered crowns, and at the flowers and herbs on the shoulders, guessing that they should have just returned from the aristocratic botanical garden. Shirat smiled. The Aztec social class can really be seen at a glance. All in all, the more you wear it, the higher the status, the more gorgeous the color, and the more revered people are. The team set up camp outside the north gate, leaving a few warriors to guard the captives, and exchanged a few words with the guards at the gate. Alosh led everyone into the city, and then the warriors quickly dispersed and went to have fun. The guard at the city gate glanced at the necklace on Shalat's neck, showing a hint of surprise and reverence. The first thing Shalat saw when he entered the city was the Pyramid Temple, which was the center of the city. Beneath the temple is the central square of the city-state, covering an area of thousands of square meters. Festivals are the venue for sacrifices, and it is also a trading market in normal times, reminding Zyolot of the farmer's market in his hometown in the past. On the periphery of the farmer's market are the stalls of villagers and citizens, with a variety of goods. Farmers bring turkeys, dogs, rabbits, tortillas, black beans, pumpkins, peppers, sunflower seeds, and last year's avocados. The potters in the city sold all kinds of pottery for daily use, and some also sold stone farm tools. In front of a booth, Shila spent 2 cocoa beans to buy a handful of sunflower seeds, and he was walking around while knocking, followed by Tells, who was also looking around. A turkey is worth 80 cocoa beans, a tortilla is about 3 cocoa beans, and black beans and squash are about the same price. A clay pot for making soup is about 100 cocoa beans. Shalat saw a farmer stuff a turkey, a few corn tortillas, a mess of avocados, and cactus tubers into a potter, took a large clay pot, and left happily. Neither side can have sufficient cocoa bean currency, and in fact, the vast majority of transactions in the market are barter. Further inside, there are craftsmen. There are all kinds of obsidian products, including warriors, animals, symbols of gods, and various small statues. Zyolot took a look around, wanting to choose a warrior statue for his father in this life, but looking at all kinds of freehand and quaint faces, he always felt something was wrong. Then he and Tells continued to go inside. Going further inside, there is a sense of a formal market. After crossing the boundary where several warriors stood, Charlotte saw the leading pointed hat warrior glanced at him sideways, stayed on the necklace around his neck for a second, and then turned back to look outside. A simple or delicate shed, with all kinds of silver and gold ornaments in the shed. The people who traveled back and forth were mostly nobles wearing colorful robes, gold and silver, and priests wearing necklaces and feather crowns. Turning the corner, Shiloh was surprised to see Orosh parked in front of an exquisite cloth tent, breathing comfortably, holding a lit cigarette between his fingers. The people around were also satisfied, sharing the relaxed atmosphere together. Charlotte leaned in to examine it carefully. The cigarettes were wrapped in leaves, and inside were dried tobacco leaves, mixed with unknown herbs and spices. He turned his head to look at the shopkeeper again, and was once again shocked to see a head that was twice as long as himself. The head elegantly curved back from the forehead, extending a slender head cover with tall feathers on it. Ornaments and dangling silver ornaments, as if aliens had arrived. Shiloh took a step back, and only then did he see the owner's rich, fat face and a sincere smile from his heart. "Hello, little priest." The round-faced alien quickly glanced at Charlotte's obsidian necklace and smiled more sincerely. "As you can see, I have a new shinyan here, from a sacred place in the rainforest far in the east, which is the sigh of the gods left in the world. As long as a small one, you can establish a connection with the gods for a quarter of an hour. Feel the beauty of the kingdom of God." He took out a small cloth bag the size of a palm. As a gift for the first time, this bag only needs a small gold ornament, or cotton cloth for 2 people, or 500 cocoa beans. Cunning Maya. Before Shilas could answer, he heard the iconic roar of the jaguar. "I'm going to smash your deformed head with an obsidian long stick. This is my student, Charlotte, you dare to deceive him. The cotton cloth for the 2 of them is enough to buy 5 bags of these inferior cigarettes." "Oh, Alash, it turned out to be your student." The alien was neither afraid nor annoyed, but just smiled and said, "Then introduce myself, I'm Takalo, a long-distance trader. Pokitka, the city-state of Tudlsi from the remote eastern rainforest." The slender head is a symbol of divinity. "We Mayan nobles are descendants of the gods, with innate elegance and kindness, and also your Aztecs friends forever." "Damn, call me Mexica, don't use the generic term Aztec," Olo said dissatisfied. "Okay, esteemed Mexica jaguar warrior. When will you pay the cotton cloth and cocoa beans you owe me? By the way." The Mayan merchant Takalo winked at Chilis again. "You reading www.uuganshu.com now you can buy 5 bags of fancy cigarettes from me for 500 cocoa beans. Trust me, the priests love the taste." Although Charlotte was curious about the taste of the earliest Mayan cigarettes, Alash said, "If you try the magic smoke too early, the gods will the life away, which is not good for the strength of the warrior's body." Half tucked under his arm, he left the Mayan shop. "Mayan aristocrats are not good things." Alashi scolded as he walked, "Cunning like a monkey, weak like a sloth, dressed like a tit, but each one speaks like a reed, and counts numbers better than anyone else. Exactly, I owe them money for no reason. If I go face to face on the battlefield, I can beat 10 of them." Charlotte inexplicably wanted to laugh, but he didn't dare to laugh out loud. Just looked back at the Mayan merchant who stood out from the crowd. In his previous life, he had traveled to Cancun, watched the so-called Maya performances in large amusement parks, and also drove to the amazing Chichen Itza pyramid. What used to be a few hours of planes and car rides is now like a moat. Half a year of arduous rainforest road, an unpredictable canoe sea road, make another visit to Chichen Itza almost become a dream of a lifetime. What kind of prosperity and beauty are the Mayan states now? With Yucatan, you can get in touch with the Caribbean island tribes as soon as possible, as well as the footholds of Europeans from afar. Charlotte's thinking habits sexually diffused. "Maybe, when I go back to Chichen Itza again, I will no longer be alone." Follow Olos, looking at the majestic and fierce tiger helmet of the jaguar warrior, behind the tall and solemn Aztec pyramid. Inexplicably, a new desire to conquer gradually began to ignite in the Mexica boy's chest. "And the Aztec Legion, my legion." Maybe it was because he was taking prisoners, maybe he met a creditor, or maybe he heard some news from the military nobles of the city-state. Early the next morning, the roar of Oroch urged everyone to get up and walk along the smooth river. Go south on the dirt road. Since entering the Mexican plateau, the road south has been comfortable and safe. The end of the dry season in Mexico is still cool and dry, the sky is clear, there is no annoying rain of the lowland jungle, and the roads are smooth enough. The villages along the way are thriving with fruit trees, and cacti and yucca are endemic crops of the highlands. On both sides of the river are countless high-yield floating fields called chinampa, and there are canoes on the river, and there are endless business and travel exchanges. This is the actual control area of the Aztec City-State Alliance, the core of the empire composed of more than a dozen Mexica city-states, including the essence of the Mexican Valley. After entering here, Elisha's mood is obviously much better, and when he has time, he will tell the story of the great city-state alliance with Charlotte. According to Scolot's understanding, Lake Texcoco is the heart of the alliance and quickly communicates with the city-states along the lake. The most central part of the empire is the Holy Three Cities. Tenochtitlan is in the Texcoco Lake, Texcoco is on the east side of the lake, and Tlacopan is on the west side of the lake. The leaders of the three city-states are the alliance at the same time the co-governing monarch, according to the words of Shallust's hometown, is the chief, second and third chiefs. As for whose status is higher, of course, it depends on the strength of the army that the three cities can mobilize. In order to facilitate memory, Xiaolot added a label to the three cities in his mind, Luoyang, Chang'an and Suchang. A circle outside the three cities, the dozen or 20 Mexica city-states within a 12-week distance from Tenochtitlan are the core of the empire and can actually be controlled. According to Elisha's description, the northeast is roughly bounded by the city of Metztitlan that has just passed through, and further northeast are the loyal subordinate Aztec people who have surrendered for more than 10 years, with an average population. From there, the empire collected vast quantities of grain, leather, and feathers each year. Xiaolot drew a circle in his heart and wrote down the words Yan Kingdom, country of thousands of vehicles, tribute. To the northwest are the hyenas and hyenas Otomi people who are constantly being conquered. The north is scattered, but they are often able to establish new city-states in the frontier. They have a large population, and their frontal force is not too strong, but they are tenacious and forbearance. Shurat drew another circle in the northwest, and wrote down the Hun, thousands of people. The country of the Ride, hostile. The southwest is bounded by the city of Rizico, and further west is the tough rival Hardstone Tarasco, who have unbelievably hard bronze weapons, and are also the only known copper mine in the world. The only time the empire suffered a disastrous defeat was in the war with Tarasco 2 years ago, in a series of fierce battles, in which at least 3 legions of 8,000 men were killed. Tenochtitlan once issued a city-state mobilization order, each household was one small, forming a large army of 100,000 people. The Tarasco city-state alliance was also shocked by the terrifying war potential of the empire, and withdrew from the empire's territory, turned its head north, and went to clean up the small city-state of the Task people. A tacit and stable peace has been maintained between the two countries. Charlotte drew a big circle in the west and wrote down Chu, the country of 10,000 vehicles, neutral. To the south are the haunters who are like weeds in the wind. They are distributed on both sides of the Balsas River. They are sparsely populated and have surrendered to the empire for many years. Some small towns of Mexican immigrants have begun to rise in this area. The label of Charlotte is Rongdi, country of hundreds of vehicles, vassal. Further south, until the Pacific coast is the weak southern city-states, from west to east, the Trapanics, the Mixtecs, the Zapotecs. These city-states are closely related to each other by blood. In the Great Montezuma I was forced to submit tribute to the empire under the conquest, but they allied with each other to fight against the pressure of the empire. Beyond the mountains in the eastern part of the Mexican Valley, and further east, are the empire's enemy of life and death, the Tlaxcalans who have been at war for decades. Both the Tlaxcala and the Aztecs are descendants of the Xiximec Nava people, with similar languages, similar cultures, and mixed blood. Similar to the Aztec Confederation, the Tlaxcalans also formed an alliance of city-states with the four cities of Tizatlan, Ocatlalco, Tepetic Park, and Cayavistran at their core. Tlaxcala has a similar military system and can mobilize an army of more than 100,000 people. It is the most dangerous enemy of the empire. In fact, in the end, it was the Tlaxcalans who introduced the Spaniards to land in Mexico, providing the Spaniards with a foothold, detailed information, sufficient food, and even 100,000 servant cannon fodder, and finally destroyed the city of Tenoch in the lake. Titlan, who also perished the Aztec civilization and himself in the disease. In fact, it was the Tlaxcalans who stained the throne of the governor of New Spain with their own blood and the blood of their Central American tribes. Thinking of the future in history, Xiaolot felt heart palpitations, drew a circle in the east, wrote down Zhao country, country of 10,000 Cheng, war, and after thinking about it, he wrote down the three words most dangerous. To the east, connected to the Tlaxcala Union, is Cholula, a religious city-state of high status. Cholula is the center of Nahuatl religion, a city of temples, beautiful and rich. There were not many warriors, but they had a special status among the city-states. Hearing this, Shalot posted a label of Eastern Zhou, country of 100 vehicles, neutral. Further east from Tlaxcala and Cholula to the Gulf Coast is another Mexica relative, the most Maya-like Nahua. UU reading www.uuganshu.com. The Nahua and the Mexica expel the Otomi people, and then settled on the coast, almost exclusively enjoying trade with the Mayans, and then re-exporting them inland. Their small boat is said to have been to the great island of the Great Distant Lake. Geographical environment has influenced the direction of politics. Decades of coastal trade have enriched the Nahua city-states, and they have lost the characteristics of relatives who are militant and belligerent. They sold strategic goods such as salt, feathers, and leather to the Tlaxcalans in exchange for peace, detached from the disputes of Central America. Xiaolot happens to have a suitable label: Chi Kingdom, country of Wanchinch, neutral. As for the more distant Mayan city-states, they are somewhat remote and elusive. Olos had only vaguely heard the names of important city-states such as Mayapan, Chichen Itza, and Chuctamar, or heard it from the mouth of a Mayan profiteer who he didn't want to think of. The temperament of the Mayan city-state was much more peaceful than that of the Mexican ministries, and the scale of war and sacrifice was smaller. Shilas found a label: Bayou, unknown. A few days passed by in small talk. After listening to the stories all the way, and memorizing the next circle of labels, Shiloh almost emptied the ink in Olash's stomach, and then slowly digested it contentedly. And a pleasant trip is always short, and there is only one day left to return to the home of this life, the ancient city of Teotihuacan in the Mexico River Valley. This trip is real and vivid. To Shiralt, this world is finally no longer a completely unknown strangeness and fog, nor will it be a cold number and result. There are some real emotions in his memories, a touch of softness, some persistence, a little curiosity, and a kind of pursuit and desire. Maybe there is still a sense of optimism. He thought, drew a circle in the center of the Mexican River Valley, and wrote down the last label: Dachin, the country of 10,000 rides, self. The blue sky sheds warm sunshine, the wind in the Mexican plateau is still cool, and the moist air brings the freshness of Lake Hartocan. The southern part of Lake Hartocan is connected to Lake Texcoco, and a dozen kilometers on the east bank is the ancient holy city of Teotihuacan, where Xiaolot was born. When I saw Hartocan Lake, the team suddenly became lively, as if there was some kind of vitality. The warriors rushed to the lake, fetched water from the lake shore, and drank the taste of their hometown. There are small boats on the lake, and the villagers who come and go see the warriors warmly say hello and inquire about the harvest of the captured prisoners. There are also girls paddling boats approaching, wearing only half-length cloth skirts, boldly showing their youthful posture, and singing love songs of admiration for warriors. Shalot blushed a little and turned to look at the village near the lake. Simple canals divert the water from the lake into the continuous cornfields outside the village, where black beans and pumpkins are mixed. The agriculture here is obviously much more developed and the population is more dense. There are many small ponds between the village and the lake, and in the ponds are rectangular floating fields of different sizes, chinampa. Chinampa can be harvested 67 times a year, making full use of the nutrients of the river mud, sufficient water and fertilizer, and less pest damage. The output is nearly 10 times that of ordinary extensive farmland. These chinampas were held by the nobles of the city-state to maintain a prosperous life. The great nobles often had chinampa gardens filled with flowers, herbs, and cocoa. Charlotte's gaze stopped for a long time on a pond near a village. Until being woken up by tells, the team set off again. Soon, a grand and quaint city appeared in Charlotte's vision. Teotihuacan has no walls, and its walls have been buried in the dust of history, along with most of the city. In ancient times, it was the city of the gods and the place where the gods left. Charlotte entered the city from the west and crossed the inconspicuous city boundary. What appeared in front of him was a magnificent spectacle that spanned thousands of years. Under the sun, a paved avenue of 40 or 50 meters wide runs through the north and south, as if leading to the end of the era, which is the famous Death Avenue. To the north at the end is a stone square, 200 meters long and wide, with a square altar in the center. This is the Plaza of the Moon, the place of sacred sacrifice and the place to please the gods. It was the first time that Charlotte saw the bright red pooling into a lake. The unforgettable shock made him realize for the first time that he had left the bloodless modern civilization forever and came to this cruel and cruel jungle. Era. The warriors marched down the road of death with their terrified captives. Further north of the altar is a magnificent pyramid, 3 times as long and wide as the avenue, and about 40 to 50 meters high. Looking up, the 5-story tower is built with boulders, and a delicate temple stands on the top of the tower. The red and blue dyes render the simple patterns, and many moons, stars, leopards and snakes are carved between the patterns. On both sides of the temple gate are 4 temple guards wearing wolf head hats. The sculptures hold a half-meter long and wide-skinned wooden shield in their left hand, and a 1-meter long obsidian long stick in their right hand. The obsidian sharp pieces on both sides of the long stick flicker with cold light. Charlotte tried to climb to the top of the tower several times, looking for a way to cross back, but was stopped by the sculptures. Here is the Pyramid of the Moon, the bridge between heaven and earth. Facing the team, and directly east of the avenue is another huge pyramid, facing the sun, with a base 200 or 300 meters long and wide, the same 5-story tower, but even taller and towering. The top of the tower is open, with a half-man-high sacrificial stone in the middle, and a half-open sun temple in the east. There is a tall statue of the sun in the temple, facing east. A gold crown, jeweled eyes, and silver ornaments hang down from the arms and waist, behind which is a pure gold sun with a diameter of several meters. The sun was falling on the top of the sun pyramid, and the dazzling golden light caught Charlotte's eyes. It is the most lofty sun pyramid. Only sacred sacrificial ceremonies can be held here, and climbing is absolutely forbidden at ordinary times. Oroch stopped with all the warriors, knelt down toward the sun temple in the east, and prayed loudly with a solemnity that Charlotte had never seen before, "Great patron Saint Huitzilopochtli, before you shine on all things. In the sunshine of, we have completed this capture. As your loyal warriors forever, we will dedicate the heart and blood of the enemy to you until we return to the earth and dedicate ourselves. I hope you will bless our bodies and weapons, let us win the next noble battle." Charlotte also finished his prayers in a similar manner, stood up, and saw Oroch order the captives to kneel before the sun and offer their faith. The captives shivered and howled wildly, thinking that death was imminent. Fear makes the limbs weak, limp, and crouching on the ground. Not far from the west side of the team is a gorgeous and continuous palace, with colorful paintings engraved on the walls and flying on the pure white cotton curtain. The world of gods, sacrificial farmland, rainforest lakes, tigers, leopards, snakes, and deer are all alive in the palace community. The painting depicts the past and present, belief and life of the Aztecs. This splendid complex is the residence of priests and nobles, as well as the daily work of the servants of the gods. Seeing the returning team, a young deacon hurriedly walked from the palace. He was 20 years old, without a feather crest, with a white shawl on his upper body and a white short skirt below, revealing his chest. An obsidian necklace representing the identity of the deacon is tied around the neck. Respected warrior Orosh, oh, and little Sherlock. The deacon smiled and winked at Charlotte. Is everything going well in capturing the prisoners? Not bad, Akap. This time we captured the Aztec territory and found a savage tribe. The opponents are very weak, and we have no warriors injured. Orosh nodded, serious expression as if not yet recover from prayer. Then he pointed at the kneeling crowd. The prisoners are all here. Okay. After simply counting the captives, he glanced at the broken leather armor of the warriors standing at the back. Akap smiled again. You have a good harvest in the returning team. Leave the male captives to me, and the female captives can be handled by yourself. 25 sacrifices, it seems that every new recruit can be promoted. Already. Orosh also laughed, turned, and roared at the warriors. Turkeys, I have good news for you. After this capture, each of you will be promoted to the first-level warrior binders. Telephones, Marley. Alashi then roared, the two of you will be promoted to the second-level warrior Aztec hunter. Charlotte saw two smiling faces eager to fight, one cruel, a simple. After I report to the elders, you will be able to pick up new battle uniforms and cloaks tomorrow. The warriors cheered excitedly. But remember, this time the opponent is very weak, you are still a group of turkeys. Only when you capture at Tlaxcala or Tarasco alone can you be called a true warrior. Telephones, Marley. You brought these four-handed women to South City and sold them to commoners without wives. The cocoa beans in exchange were distributed to the brothers, and the weapons and leather armor were repaired. Again a burst of cheers. By the way, if it is my own, it can be cheaper. Alash said and patted Chalice on the shoulder again, and said with a smile, Shirot, it's a pity that this is not for you. But Shirut didn't seem very interested. Akap took the talk and said with a smile, okay, Alash. Now that the arrangement is over, you and Charlotte will come with me. The leader of Husak has already told him to go see him as soon as you come back. After speaking, he took the two of them to the gorgeous palace. The priest's palace community is divided into two layers. The guards at the bottom wear animal helmets, wear yellow robes, and have the costumes of jaguars and eagles. The acolytes wore solid-colored cloaks or waistcoats, and carried wooden boards painted with images to and fro. The three walked along the granite steps to the second floor of the palace community, and passed in front of an extremely tall palace. Charlotte vaguely heard the sound of fierce disputes coming from the palace. A huge multicolored curtain flutters at the entrance of the palace. In the center of the cloth curtain is sitting upright, holding up scepters and shields, the unusually tall sun god of war and patron saint of Mexico, Huitzilopochtli, with dark green feathers covering the back half of the main god, like the sun. Radiate all around. Beside the curtain of the temple gate are two guards wearing wolf heads and black robes. One of them cast a questioning look at Akap. Akap pointed to Alash and Shalot, and then to the right. The guard nodded, and gave Shalot from the gap in the wolf's mouth a toothy grim smile. Shiloh rolled his eyes, but Alash looked a little nervous. Akap took the two to the right. Shirot asked in a low voice, what are the high priests discussing in the main temple? You'll find out later. Akap smiled and didn't answer, and seemed to have something on his mind all of a sudden. After a while, the three of them came to a side hall again. There was also a huge cloth curtain at the entrance of the side hall. Above it was with his hands raised high, the head of a man and a dog, looking up at the sky. He has a bright red tongue, deep black feathers and a crown, as if he were about to leap from a bright red throne at any moment. This is the of thunder and death, the of the night star who escorts the sun, and the twin brother of Shuratel, the of feathers. The guards of the side hall were much more enthusiastic. "Little Charlotte, you're back? How was the hunt? Are you bloodied? Did you capture any prisoners?" Charlotte nodded and shook his head, followed Akap without saying a word. Entering the side hall, facing a low stone table, a wooden board on the stone table. A burly man in his 30s was sitting cross-legged on the ground, wearing a painted red robe, a dark green feather crest on his head, and a silver guard ring around his wrist. Holding a wooden pen, the nib is made of tough hair, dipped in black paint, and 2 patterns are engraved on the wooden board like writing or drawing. Schillis took 2 steps forward and saw that the square pattern in front was a shield and a club, and the square pattern in the back was a corpse wrapped in a white cloth. He and the man in front of him had studied writing and knew that the 2 hieroglyphs meant war and death. The man raised his head, revealing a chiseled and resolute face. Deep eyebrows, a high nose bridge, and a confident demeanor. His eyes were piercing, and he first landed on Charlotte. A smile appeared on the corner of his mouth, then he looked at Akap and nodded. Finally, looking at Olash behind him, laughter burst out. "Welcome back, my warrior. You are also welcome, my son. It's time for you to come back." The man stood up, revealing his tall muscular body. Then he spread his arms in a welcoming gesture. "The war is about to begin. Good news, Captain Hersok. When? Who are we going to fight?" Olashi also raised his arms in return, and asked excitedly and surprised. "A few days ago, a messenger came from Tenochtitlan with orders from the new Trotoani. The king wants us to start mobilizing, and next month the coronation war will begin, against the Austrians in the northwest. The Tommy, on the grounds that the Otomi refused to pay tribute to the alliance." Husok and Orosh exchanged their arms, then asked, "How is this capture?" "I took Schillis and the new recruits to the Aztec people in the north and caught dozens of savages. The Aztec people are still obedient and have enough food. It seems that the northeast will not be able to do it recently. What's the big problem?" Olash thought for a while, and then added, "Shirot's physical fitness and martial arts are both good. He solved a quasi-warrior in this operation. It's just that there are too many problems, and I want to know everything." Luoshi had a bitter face. "There are some numbers, it makes sense, how can I answer it as a soldier? Haha, he can beat my number 1 warrior, it seems that this kid has grown a lot." Husok smiled and patted Xiaoluo's head. It hurts a bit. Is the city-state going to send troops this time? How many troops?" "Of course, as the king's relatives, the city-state will definitely send troops to respond. The specific amount of troops, the priests and elders have discussed all morning. It should be known when the high priest returns. However, the king has announced that Tenochtitlan 3 elite Hikipili will be mobilized, that is, a regiment of 8,000 people. Texcoco and Tracapan will each mobilize 1 elite regiment, and then the villages under the 3 cities will mobilize 5 civilian regiments. Then the capital's 3 cities will mobilize a total of 10 regiments of 8,000 people, that is, 80,000 people." Shirot took a deep breath. 80,000 warriors? The math of Schillis is really good. Orosh was also a little surprised. When the rainy season is approaching, mobilizing an army of 100,000 people to go to the mountain city of the Otomi people in the north? This is not a wise choice. Yet. Hwosik put away his smile and nodded slowly. The city-state on the southern side of Sarko can mobilize at least 2 regiments, 1 each for Watstpek and Kuanavok, and 1 for the northern side. The 2 regiments near Weefutland will be recruited. At least 4 regiments can be sent to Tepanakapan, Tolakang, and Lazako in the west. In order to prevent the Tlaxcalans from moving, the calculation should be its 20 regiments of 8,000 people. There is no need to worry about the frontal battlefield. Even if the Otomi city-states send reinforcements, there will only be 10 regiments, and the combat effectiveness is incomparable to our elite warrior regiment. Orosh patted his chest confidently. But 20 regiments would cost at least 100,000 people. And in the wet rainy season, the food consumed every day is uncountable. Uyukanshu www.uyuganshu.com. The village of Otomi in the north has always been poor and cannot plunder much food. Once the Otomi people hide in the city-state and hold on, and the war drags on, we're in trouble. My worries are also here. Husok subconsciously pinched Charlotte's face. It still hurts. But the Aztec in the northeast provides a lot of tribute every year, and it doesn't make sense or good for them. The three-nation city-state alliance in the south has been respectful these years, and they are linked to each other. Throwing a stone will definitely bring a ripple. Tarasco is very strong in combat, and we have been defeated in the past 2 years. Not to mention Tlaxcala in the east. If we want to fight, we must mobilize all of them, and everyone is not ready. Choose the Otomi of the north. In the end, it's still bullying the soft and fearing the hard. Orosh grumbled in dissatisfaction, how can the king not have the heart of a warrior? Olosh paused, lowered his voice and said, the prestige of the new king has not yet been established. If you fight against the enemy Tlaxcala or the mighty Tarascos, even if you are defeated, you will not complain. But against the weak and cunning Otomi people, you won't get any advantage. Don't say defeated. Even if there are fewer wins, it will make everyone dissatisfied. Husok smiled and nodded in agreement. Olosh, your talent is more than enough to be the leader of an elite regiment. It's a pity that our city-state didn't have an elite group to bring me. Orosh laughed. There will be in the future, definitely. The two looked at each other and laughed at the same time. Charlotte was in a trance when he saw Akap walking in from outside the temple, and he didn't know when he left. All I could hear was Akap saying with a smile, "Boss, the high priest has finished the meeting and is now on his way here." Everyone stopped talking and went out to greet them. Standing at the entrance of the temple, Shilas saw an old man in his 50s approaching him. He has a pair of eagle-like eyes, and where his sharp eyes land, it makes people feel cold. Time has left deep marks on his face, blending with the bright red lines on his face, and portrayed on the majestic and indifferent face, making people not feel old, but has a kind of magic that is not like the world. The old man wore a formal obsidian long crown, which looked very heavy, with a wide crown, and in front of it was a sacred face arranged with gems. The eyes of 2 large rubies are scanning the world as the old man walks. The top of the crown is countless half-meter long green long feathers, and behind the crown is a dense blue short feather, like a brilliant sun, which spreads out neatly. Seeing the heavy high priest's crown, Shiloh felt a pain in his head. Akap and Olosh seemed to have been stabbed by something, so they lowered their heads and dared not look directly. Under the sun, the old man gradually approached, and the light flickered, almost illuminating Charlotte's eyes. He is wearing a red cloak with a circle of red feathers inlaid on the outside. The cloak is engraved with a golden sun, and a gorgeous robe inside, with gold and silver particles on the front and back, inlaid with the rays of the sun and the moon. The dazzling necklace hangs down from the neck and is composed of the top obsidian, with countless golden sand-like translucent spots in it. The bracelet and anklet are also made of pure gold, and the golden light glitters when walking. The Mexicans don't care about the monetary value of gold, they simply revere the color of the sun. The old man's walking was slow and steady, as if he was assuming some kind of divine nature. Akap bowed his head and stepped forward, wanting to help one or two, but when he saw the old man turned his head slightly, and did not see the eyes of joy and anger, he immediately stood with his hands and waited aside. Everyone bowed their heads and waited quietly on both sides, until the old man walked slowly into the side hall, and then followed in a file, crowding behind the old man. The air became quiet for a while, until the old man stopped and turned around. His sharp eyes fell on Hersok's face. Hersok lowered his head and leaned over to make himself lower than the old man's eyes. Shusok, the Council of Priests has decided to mobilize a mixed group to participate in the coronation war. You will be the leader of the 8,000 people and lead them to fight for the king and the city-state. Alosh raised his head and let out an uncontrollable cheer. Then he was stabbed by the old man's gaze and lowered his head again. Yes. High Priest. I will fight for the city-state and the king. Hearing this reply, a faint smile appeared on the high priest's stone-like face. Then his eyes swept over Akap and Alosh. Husak, I have something to talk to you alone. Akap and Alosh made a godly ritual, pushed the door consciously and went out, and then closed the door. Only then did High Priest Shooter take off the obsidian crown on his head and slowly put it on the stone table, revealing his grey hair. As if he had removed some kind of heavy divinity, he could take a breath at this time, and the expression on his face became more vivid. Shiloh stepped forward and touched the stone crown. It was really hard, and he tried to hug again, it was so heavy. It should be made of real stone. It seems that being a high priest is really physical work, and my grandfather is in good health. Husak hurriedly stepped forward to help, helping the old man remove the thick and long cloak, the solid necklace, and the pure gold bracelet. It was only then that Xiaolot could see that beneath the dazzling and tall priest costume, was a thin, weather-beaten old man. Shooter sat relaxed on the ground, and his thin body finally got a little hunched. He patted the position beside him and let Shiraut sit next to him, stroking his grandson's head with his left hand naturally. He pulled Husak with his right hand and asked him to sit across from him, one big and two small, making each other interesting. There are no outsiders anymore, so I can finally say something private. The city-state has decided to mobilize a regiment of 8,000 people and 10 battalions, half of which are elite battalions of the city-state and half of which are village civilians. This time, I suppressed all the elders and asked you to be the head of the expedition. The old man's eyes were still sharp and unusual. You must seize this opportunity and take down enough military exploits. When you come back, I will have a reason to upgrade you from a second-level hereditary noble to a third-level honorable noble, and in a few years, you will be able to become a city-state manager as you should. The high priest said solemnly. Destiny. Husak nodded, but there was a rare hint of hesitation. This battle is not easy to fight. The Otomi people are unlikely to fight us heathen, and the king's decision seems a bit hasty. Huddle nodded. Every decision the king makes is naturally the king's responsibility. But I will send a messenger to him to let you avoid meaningless siege battles. What you need to do is to find a suitable time to fight the Otomi people heathen. Don't care about casualties. I only want you to come back, and I only want enough results. The warriors are like blooming flowers, always withering in the somewhere. The commoners are even more weeds in the fields. Even if they die, they will continue to emerge. Only you are the cocoa tree blessed by the gods, destined to assume the responsibility of leading the city-state. Husak remained silent and did not answer. Shuttle put his right hand on his shoulder, looked at his son's resolute face, and said softly, I know, because of your background, you have some naive feelings towards commoners and lower-class warriors. I can't accompany you and teach you the way of aristocracy, but let your mother give you too many soft feelings of commoners. But the tree and the weeds cannot be at the same height. As a priest, the law stipulates that I cannot officially marry a wife. But as the blood of the sun god, I must cultivate a big tree to protect the family from wind and rain. You were born with the future on your shoulders. Fight. Victory must be watered with life. The warriors of the city-state don't care if their leader is a or not. What they care about is whether you are brave enough and have enough in your hands the blood of the enemy. Husak finally nodded, looked into his father's eyes, and said loudly, I will, father. Shalot pretended to be a rag doll and listened to the teachings of the three views of discord. All his attention was on his grandfather's robe. How these gold and silver grains were inlaid on the cotton cloth, to the touch, it seemed that some kind of precision silk was used. Technology and natural viscose. UU reading www.uuganshu.com maybe can be used to make cloth armor? So Shooter's eyes finally turned to the grandson beside him. How are you going to arrange Shalis? Hwosik looked at his son lovingly, and said, Shirot just came back from hunting. When I go out, I plan to let him rest at home and learn the knowledge of priests from you. Shuttle pondered for a moment, shook his head and said, No. Let Shirot go with you, the priest's knowledge can be supplemented later. When the results of this capture are completed, I will promote Shirot to assistant priest. Then during this war, you will give him a few captives, so that when he returns, I can promote him to the rank of second priest Pamit. But Shalot is only 12 years old. Such a young second-class priest. Bring him. Charlotte is good at mathematics and can help you calculate the food and forage clearly. With mathematics and military exploits, it is enough to convince the public. Besides, I am here. Saying that, Shuttle lowered his head lovingly and pinched Charlotte's face. The movement is light and painless at all. Shirot, you have been smart since you were a child. You are our hope and the family's hope. Listen to your father's words. I know that you actually know everything. 12 or 13-year-old second-level priest, in a few years, I will make you the youngest 5th-level coyote priest. Then when I go, you can take my place. You have to remember, Shuttle stared at Shalot's eyes, as if to convey something with his eyes. You are also the descendant of Iscoatl, the current Mexicatratoani, with the same bloodline as you. Your future has infinite possibilities. And my future, the old man finally whispered to himself, it's only a few years away from the kingdom of God. At noon the next day, the sun was warm and dazzling. Shalot was wearing the robe of an aide, sitting on the mini pyramid beside the palace, looking up at the magnificent moon pyramid in front of him. The decision of the priesthood has spread throughout the city-state and nearby villages, and today is the day for the mobilization speech. Shalot looked at the high moon pyramid. His grandfather Shuttle was wearing a full set of dozens of pounds of high priest costumes, the golden light flickered and shone in all directions. The pyramid of the moon has a special meaning for Shalot, where everything changes. Staring at the pyramid of the moon, the dazzling light made him wake up like a dream, sinking into some distant memory. It was a past memory, even if it had begun to blur. In that memory, he was a post-90s youth who liked history and geography. He was curious about the ancient civilizations of the Americas, and he played the Aztecs countless times in civilization and Europe. At the age of 25, he finally had the opportunity to travel to Teotihuacan, Mexico, and secretly climbed the Pyramid of the Moon at night. That night, he sat on the ruins of the temple at the top of the tower. The Milky Way is vast, and by coincidence, the Leonid meteor shower, which occurs once in 10 years, is rustling down. On a whim, I made a loud wish to the meteor, I would like to go back to the past, lead the ruined Indian civilization to rise again, defeat the invading European colonists, and turn America into the America of the Indians. Before he finished speaking, he fell to the ground in blackness before his eyes. In his confusion, he felt a beam of white light, followed by infinite dizziness and rapid color changes. When he woke up again, he could no longer see the world, and could only vaguely feel it. The surrounding situation is still in the ancient city of Teotihuacan, but there is a lot of life everywhere. He wandered in the hazy world with no purpose or direction. He just came to a remote thatched hut by feeling, where there was a huge attraction. He walked through the wall and felt two connected lives. One was a weak stray light, and the other was a colorless dot. By feeling, he threw himself into the colorless dots, the white light flashed in an instant, and his consciousness was blurred. The next awakening was accompanied by a piercing cry, which seemed to be made by yourself. He opened his eyes and saw the low roof and two faces that seemed to be both happy and sad. Black hair, yellow skin, and a hunched figure cast a huge shadow in the moonlight, covering his small frame. The sad look finally replaced the joyous look. He didn't cry anymore, but heard another suppressed cry. A hunched figure suddenly straightened up and carried him out of the room. The crying gradually faded away, and the baby's brain couldn't support him thinking too much. He felt that he was being held by a pond, and then the water gradually flooded over him. Become an abandoned baby yourself? The young body coughed violently and couldn't breathe. It seemed that he heard a new cry next to him. His consciousness gradually became blurred, and the new body was no longer conscious. When he woke up again, he turned into a white light without vision. This time he didn't wander around anymore. After recognizing the scale of the building, he slowly drifted towards the most prosperous and huge center, resisting the occasional attraction from the surroundings. Wandering in the center of the ancient city, I finally felt the new attraction in the bustling palace and society, so I threw myself into the colorless dots again. Waking up again was accompanied by his own crying as always, and an uncontrollable laughter. Opening his eyes, a young and burly man was holding himself up with both hands, wearing a feather crown, an erect body, and a white cotton robe. The resolute face, the same black hair and yellow skin. The roof is high and painted with colorful figures and scenery. There was a circle of people kneeling around, grinning but silent. There was still a young woman lying on the bed, but she was laughing with tears. Soon, a middle-aged man dressed in gorgeous clothes and wearing a stone crown hurried over, poked his calf away, then looked at his little one and laughed with joy, and then said something incomprehensible loudly. A word is repeated several times. The surrounding people also repeated the word, vaguely, Shirot. Since then, he has had a new name, Charlotte. The middle-aged man in the memory is now standing on the high platform, and time has aged his face. Only the dazzling golden light illuminates the crowd below. Nobles, warriors, and commoners came from all directions, gathered under the pyramid, and listened to the divine news conveyed by the high priest. God of the sun, of war, the people guarded by Vizilapoctli. The blood of Viziropoctli, the new Trotoani, brings the order of the gods to take up arms and join the king's holy coronation war, to capture the offering chosen by the gods, the Wikotomi people of the north. The majestic voice was recited by the priests from the top of the moon pyramid layer by layer, becoming more and more grand, finally covering the entire square, and awakening the Shirata in his memories. 12 rainy seasons have passed since the last holy war and great sacrifice. The son of the fifth era made a promise with us that he needs thousands of hearts to maintain the light of the sky, otherwise the sun will go out, all things will wither. Now is the time for sacrifice. The earth under our feet, Cipitelli, has also made a promise with us that he makes corn grow and nurtures all things, and we repay it with blood, otherwise the grain will never be harvested. The earth thirsts for blood. The world is balanced, and the god of war keeps the world running. As each of you knows, the population of the city-state is increasing, the number of babies being abandoned is increasing, and there will be less and less food in our hands. The world has lost its balance, and God of War needs life to prevent the destruction of the world. We only have one choice, to capture the enemy's life and sacrifice it to our guardian. This is a battle of gods to save the world. Limited productivity, limited food, limited population limit and unlimited population growth. This is the historical cycle law of Central America. Sherald thought that there were inevitable reasons for the seemingly endless wars and sacrifices. The commoners were talking in panic, worried about the priest's terrifying prophecy. Fear was channeled again, transformed into a determination to take up arms. The nobles and samurai remained silent. I swear in the name of the patroness, in this sacred war, all young warriors, as long as they capture one prisoner, can be promoted to the first-class captive. If 2 captives are regenerated, they can be promoted to the second-class Aztec hunter. 3 reborn prisoners, 3-level elite fire warriors, 4 regenerate prisoners, they are the real 4-level senior warriors. UU reading www.uuganshu.com can join the Eagle Warrior Group or the Jaguar Warrior Group, and get a piece of wealth from the city-state forever the land, even the Chinampa in the lake. The same goes for all the priests involved in the war. The warriors roared and shouted excitedly with unknown meaning, and some even pulled out their long sticks to make the sound of knocking on their shields. Some newly promoted military aristocrats were also excited when they heard about Kinampa. Our enemies were the weak Otomi people, whose ancestors were so easily expelled from our Gajavan Valley of Mexico, that killing them was as simple as pulling up weeds. And these hyenas still haunt our valleys, drooling over our farmland. Only by completely sacrificing them to the gods can we defend our most precious land. The Otomi city-states were rich, with countless tortillas, black refried beans, cocoa nuts, cotton cloth, and all kinds of beautiful flowers, feathers, herbs, silver, gold, obsidian, and precious stones. There are no warriors in their city-state, only sacrifices, slaves, and your future wives. The hereditary nobles were finally moved, and the big nobles whispered about the lack of luxury goods. Desire finally burns in the eyes of all. Warriors, for the promise of the gods, for the glory of the warriors, for our land, and for the wealth that belongs to you, let's join the holy war. The priests will join you, in the name of God, this battle will be won. At this moment, except for Charlotte, everyone in the audience finally fell into meaningless shouting and howling, and finally, under some guidance, it was transformed into two words that shook the world: war, war. The tidy shouts resounded through the sky, representing the will of a certain nation. This scene, deeply engraved in the eyes of a young man, is unforgettable. 2 full weeks have passed since the unforgettable mobilization, and the Legion of the Teotihuacan city-state has finally been formed. The dry season has passed, the rainy season has not yet arrived, the cool wind has become moist, and the warm sunshine is still so comfortable. The south of the city was converted into a large military camp. During this period, Charlotte watched his father, met with the hereditary nobles who participated in the war, saluted, greeted each other, had dinner, made promises, and then exchanged gifts. Watching him fight with the elite warriors, hug, brag, praise, learn martial arts, and finally drink tequila to the point of intoxication. It is also necessary to occasionally meet with representatives of the township soldiers, mediate disputes, and show majesty. Slowly, a military leadership group with Husak as the core finally took shape, and the newly established 8,000 strong regiment was able to be commanded reluctantly. The Aztec military system was based on a 20-man squad, and the core of the squad was a captain. Then stack up in units of 20, 200, 400, 800, up to the final 8,000-man regiment, Hikipili. The ultimate force unit that measures all city-states. With Charlotte's tireless suggestion, Husak finally divided the legion into 10 battalions, each with 800 men. Of the 10 battalions, 5 elite battalions are from urban communities, and are basically composed of formally trained warriors. Among them, senior warriors of the 4th rank, including Eagle and Jaguar fighters, are gathered in a senior veteran battalion. They have sufficient ability to use a javelin. This is the core of the Legion's combat effectiveness. And the commander of the old barracks is naturally the most trusted number 1 warrior, Oroch. The rest are 5 civilian camps, levies from subordinate villages, and most of them have only superficial training experience. Some of the fighters had experience hunting with slings, and they were all assembled in a sling battalion, the other 4 were melee battalions. On this day, the reorganized legion finally gathered in the school grounds of the military camp. The priests held high the banner of the gods and maintained the order of the scene together with the nobles of all levels. The samurai heads of divisions gathered together to form a circular array of uneven size. Zyasok, dressed in a gorgeous battle uniform, stood in the most conspicuous position, surrounded by noble officers from various battalions. Everyone was proud of each other, and while looking at the army under his command, he eagerly announced desire to fight. Sirat brought Akap, the new bodyguard and assistant sent by his grandfather, to visit each camp in the name of a priest. The 1st battalion is the old barracks. Senior warriors wear yellow or green leather armor, red and yellow cloaks, and beast-shaped helmets. Holding a shield in one hand and a dancing stick in the other, the obsidian sharp pieces on both sides of the battle stick flashed a sharp cold light in the sun. Most of them carried a throwing spear behind them, with the spear thrower tucked into their waists. The veterans stand naturally, and the team automatically forms an unfolding battle formation. Their faces were relaxed, with a time-honored indifference. The calloused right hand dances the battle stick at will, bringing out the charm of tempering. Charlotte turned twice and counted more than 200 eagles and tiger heads full of deterrence. It turns out that we only have 200 jaguars and eagle fighters. Charlotte sighed in disappointment. This is a bit far from the legion I imagined. I thought there would be a legion of jaguars and eagles. 8,000 jaguar warriors. Acap chuckled, the entire city-states of Mexico can't make up for this number. The 3 cities in the capital can probably pull out more than 2,000 jaguars and eagles. Plus more than 500 hairbreakers, this is enough for every king to coerce many city-states. Okay. The eagle will have it, and the jaguar will have it. Charlotte began to take notes in his mind: veteran barracks, ace, sword/cudgel shield soldier, 1 spear throwing, medium leather armor, morale high, undisciplined, intimidating ordinary troops. Excellent assault infantry. Following a familiar evaluation, it helped him quickly understand the strength of the troops. Next, the 2nd to 5th battalions are elite battalions. Depending on their affluence, warriors of all levels wore leather armor or battle suits, and some also wore capes. Most of the warriors wore pointed hats, the same obsidian battle clubs, and skinned round shields. The faces of the new samurai were all kinds of excitement and imagination about the battle. In the somewhat cluttered team, Charlotte saw 2 familiar faces, a warm smile at him and a stiff smile at him. Elite battalion, elite, sword/shield soldiers, semi-leather and light armor, average morale, poor discipline. The melee infantry that maintains the front line has a low armor rate. Well, it's acceptable. Further down, the 6th to 9th civilian camps. The equipment of these village warriors is much more rudimentary. Most were topless, with only a few wearing combat uniforms. Stone spears, wooden spears, stone sticks, all kinds of weapons, and the popularity of shields are not enough. Only a small number of leaders have standard battle sticks and shields. The village warriors chatted excitedly with each other, and the camp was noisy. Perhaps they share the same passion for combat, but this untrained passion is quickly swept away by the enemy or the harsh environment. Plain civilians, commoners, short spearmen, commoners without armor, low morale, lack of discipline. Charlotte put his hand on his forehead. What can such armed men be used for? Cannon fodder to fill the front? The regiment can't be maintained at all. Maybe after improving the discipline, you can consider taking a long shot. The 10th slinging camp gave Charlotte some fresh feelings. These seasoned hunters hold a long rope and pinch the ends of the rope with 2 fingers. Then turn the rope with all your might to make the stone accelerate in the center of the rope, making a thudding sound. Then, based on feeling and experience, at the right angle, open a finger, let the rope unfold, and launch the rounded stone with a swoosh, hitting the school field with a puff of dust. Although the quasi-head is impressive, the power of the cluster launch is still considerable, especially for opponents without armor or light armor. It is a pity that although this equipment is simple, it is not a year or 2 to practice well. Slinger battalion, ordinary, slinger, commoner without armor, low morale, lack of discipline. A long-range strike unit that needs terrain support to attack the enemy's morale. Charlotte said that he could only accept the only long-range force. As for the simple single bow of some hunters, Charlotte tried to shoot a few wooden arrows, and expressed despair at the range and power. Why are our archers so weak? Charlotte asked inexplicably. Bows and arrows are inherently weak. Only weak tribesmen would use such weak weapons. Acap said, of course. Well, not quite. The Tlaxcalans have a single bow that is nearly a man tall, with a copper arrow that can shoot through a layer of cotton wool in 50 steps. Our samurai was swept away by the vile Tlax. The Kara people have attacked many times. 50 STEP broken cotton armor, it sounds very good. We can also form such archers. Yuyukanshu www.yuyuganshu.com. A powerful long-range army is very important in certain terrains. Where is the long-range sneak attack done by the samurai, and how can they capture the captives? Akap was stunned by Shalot and smiled. Of course, there is another reason that we can't do it. The elastic band needed for the bowstring. The number is too small. In fact, many leaders will have a big bow, but it is still far from enough to form an army. Where did the Tlaxcalans get their bowstrings? Who knows what secret crafts they have? But most of the rubber bands should come from the trade with the Nawa or Maya by the sea, that group of Mayan merchants. But it doesn't matter, without bows and arrows, our warriors swept the world. It swept the world? No, it was the world that swept us. Shurat thought with a wry smile. With spears, bows and arrows, and leather armor, Shalot thought seriously about the legion's shortcomings and improvements. Overall, the political structure of the Mexica city-states is similar to that of the early Greek city-states, or the 50 princes of the Western Zhou dynasty. The military equipment, organizational level, barely maintained in the spring and autumn period, Wu and Yu for hegemony. Only the military mobilization ability reached the level of the Qin dynasty in the Warring States period. There are no cavalry, no archers, and no heavy infantry. This is still hundreds of years away from the Roman army or the Qin army. Europe is already in the era of arquebuses and plate armor. Akap also followed to find novelty in the sky. Metal, only copper mines. Copper spears, copper armor, heavy infantry, Macedonian phalanx. Shirat's eyes lit up, then dimmed again. The only known copper mine was in the hands of Tarasco. There's a long way to go. Charlotte said words that no one understood. Fortunately, I still have time. At this time, a messenger came hurriedly from the south gate, bringing a message. The king's army has already moved from the capital.